So I'm looking at it and I'm trying to focus the binoculars in and they're not working, but I see a head and no neck and these giant broad shoulders that creep, like that widen out. And I just see fur, like a reddish, blackish kind of hue. But I could see it, like it wasn't bark, it wasn't grass, it wasn't, like the ground. Like it was very clearly like fur, like hair. And I was like, is that a bear I'm seeing? But I don't know any reddish bears around here. And it doesn't have the body type. Like it looks like broad shoulders, no neck, and then like a head. And then, so I'm looking a little bit more, and the shadow of, I think, a tree or something is kind of crossed over, like the back side of it. But I see it taper down from the shoulders kind of into the hip area. And I'm like, there's no way that I'm looking at a Bigfoot right now through my crappy binoculars on my first expedition. Like, this doesn't happen.
I'd like to welcome Kyle to the show. Kyle, thanks for joining me on Bigfoot Crossroads. How are you?
I'm good, man. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, so you reached out to me after I did a show with Brian Sharp of Sasquatch Odyssey. And I guess you were part of the entourage that went and checked out Radium, where Todd Standing does his work?
Yeah, so I work kind of hand in hand with Todd Standing, and I had been in contact with Brian probably about 2 years prior to the actual expedition, and I did a show with him. And as Todd is, as everybody knows, Todd is a very controversial man. My connection with him kind of got me in with Brian, and eventually I just kind of was like, dude, you got to come out. There's really no way for me to explain everything to you, and if you don't want to believe and you have to see it for yourself, then here's an opportunity. And the first year it didn't work out, but the next year it did. So I got him out to Radium for a week, and I'm sure he told you all about it. So
let's just, of course I want to hear, how did you end up working with Todd?
It's a really kind of wild story, but it isn't at the same time. It's one of those happenstance things.
Yeah.
So I've been into Bigfoot my whole life. Ever since I could start, reading books, and Monster Quest was a big one for me on the History Channel. And now I know Doug Hychek.
Yeah.
Which is crazy to me. And
same.
So, yeah, it's so crazy. So watching Monster Quest really kind of piqued my interest, and that's with aliens and Loch Ness Monster and all that stuff, and especially Bigfoot. So Todd's documentary Discovering Bigfoot came out, and I watched it, and I was like, oh my God, this is revolutionary. So I was still living at home. I think it was 2015 at the time when I saw it, 2015, 2016. So my dad got home from work, and I was like, Dad, you got to watch this documentary. So, it's like a 2.5 hour documentary. So I sat down and watched it again with my dad. And we both looked at each other, and my dad and I are very, very close. You can ask anybody this. We looked at each other, and we hadn't talked about this scenario that we had in the Adirondacks some years back. And actually, no, I'm sorry. I got the timeline wrong. So I watched the documentary, I think in like 2018 or 2019. And we had that experience in the Adirondacks in like 2015, 2016. So we looked at each other and were like, hey, remember that time in the Adirondacks? And I was like, yep, that's exactly what I was thinking. Because him and I didn't talk about it. We had this weird, crazy encounter, and we never talked about it. So it was this kind of catalyst for us to kind of open that Bigfoot book and talk about what happened and what we thought it was. So eventually I started watching Todd Standing's stuff and, going to his YouTube channel, subscribe to him, and just kind of got into it and watched his live streams and stuff. And one night I was watching his live stream, and I think it was 2020. Yeah, it was 2020. And so I commented on his live stream. I was like, hey, Todd, I'm a big fan. I'd love to come out and do an expedition with you one day. And a couple minutes later, he's, talking, and he just stops, like, on the live stream, and he goes, "Hey, Kyle, yeah, anytime you want to come on an expedition, just send me an email." My jaw about hit the floor. It's like, oh my God, he just called me out. There's like thousands of people watching, and he saw my comment for no reason, like in the middle of a sentence, and was just like, "Yeah, send me an email." So I sent him an email, and I told him, what happened in the Adirondacks. And 2 weeks later, I'm getting a phone call from British Columbia. And I was like, no way. And ever since then, him and I have just been friends, and he's one of my best friends right now. That man single-handedly changed my life.
Wow.
So, and it sucks because he gets a lot of heat, and he gets a lot of hatred for things that he's done. And it sucks because he's a great guy. He's changed my life, and he's one of my best friends. So I'll always be in his corner.
I mean, I'm kind of speechless right now. Just, being completely transparent. I mean, as you said, extremely controversial guy.
Yes.
Especially whenever it comes to like mainstream Bigfoot research.
Right.
What gravitated you towards him?
Well, his documentary is really what did it, because nobody else has stuff like that out there.
So you're just all in, 100% believe that those are really Bigfoot on the video.
Yeah, no, 100%.
Okay.
Yep. No, I know that they're real Sasquatch. And I went out there. I've been out there for 3 years in a row. I spent 8 weeks in his research area. No, I'm sorry, 6 weeks in his research area. It's going to be, I'm probably going to spend a month or two up there this year. But I've seen them. I know that that's them.
I mean, you're not, I don't want you to feel out of place or anything. You're not here to defend Todd or anything like that. I'm just curious to hear your own experiences, and, the stuff that you have witnessed firsthand and everything. I don't want you to feel like I'm attacking Todd in any way.
No. And I mean, even if you did, I'm just going to tell you the reasons why I think, why I think he's right, but it's okay. So it's actually, I never had a sighting until I went out to Todd's research area. I found footprints in the Adirondacks with him, but we didn't have a sighting in the Adirondacks. And then when I went up to Radium, that's when I had my first sighting. And then I went again the next year, which would have been 2 years ago now, had a second sighting. And then this year I was out with Brian this past season. We didn't have any sightings. So actually my dad did have a sighting at base camp.
Well, let's talk about that first trip to Todd's and what that experience was like for you.
Okay. Yeah. So we were out there. It was me and two other guys out there on an expedition with Todd. And I knew Todd pretty decently well at that point, but we're still kind of growing our relationship. So I'm still kind of like questioning a lot of things, and it's obviously my first year in his research area, so I'm being really thorough with everything that I'm seeing and trying to learn as much as I can. And so we're taking this hike. I think it was on the Elk Trail, which we have different trails named just to help kind of differentiate where we're going and what we're doing.
Right.
So on the Elk Trail, it goes on top of a ridge, and it runs down the top of the ridge and kind of cuts back down into the valley. And so at some point there's an open spot, and you can look out, towards and see the valley and see the other mountain ridges and everything like that. And I took a moment to just stop and look, and I had these tiny little crappy binoculars that I brought from home that probably got from the dollar store. Like some of the worst binoculars you could ever find. And so I'm scanning this ridgeline, and I go across something, and I'm like, I mean, it's probably a mile away, and these binoculars are not really picking up much, but it just looked weird. I could see a little bit of detail, and I could see an outline, but that was about it. Like, I couldn't focus on it.
Yeah.
So I'm like scanning, and I see this figure, and I like, in the movies when they show somebody going over something with binoculars, and all of a sudden they stop and skip back to it.
Yeah.
It was just like that. And I was like, wait, what the hell is that? So I'm looking at it and I'm trying to focus the binoculars in, and they're not working. But I see a head and no neck and these giant broad shoulders that creep, like that widen out. And I just see fur, like a reddish, blackish kind of hue. But I could see it, like it wasn't bark, it wasn't grass, it wasn't, like the ground. Like it was very clearly like fur, like hair. And I was like, is that a bear I'm seeing? I don't know any reddish bears around here. And it doesn't have the body type. Like it looks like broad shoulders, no neck, and then like a head. And then so I'm looking a little bit more, and the shadow of, I think, a tree or something is kind of crossed over like the backside of it. But I see it taper down from the shoulders kind of into the hip area. And I'm like, there's no way that I'm looking at a Bigfoot right now through my crappy binoculars on my first expedition. Like this doesn't happen. So I was like, you know what? I'm just going to sit here and stare at it. And if it moves, then I'll know. And if it doesn't move, then maybe I'll know. I'm going to get an answer somehow. Was I wrong? So I'm watching this thing for a solid like 45 seconds, and it's not moving at all. I'm like, okay, maybe I'm wrong. Maybe it's just my eyes playing tricks on me. Like I'm in Bigfoot habitat. I'm with Todd Standing. I'm expecting to see something. I was like, all right, you know what? I'm going to do something crazy, and I'm going to regret this, but I'm going to have to do it. I'm going to just take off. I'm just going to look away. I'm going to put the binoculars down and just look away, readjust my eyes. I'm going to give it 10, 15 seconds, and I'm going to come back up to it, see if I can find it again, see if it's moved, like just kind of try to readjust my eyes on it. So that's what I do. I look away, and I give it a little bit longer than, 10, 15 seconds. Todd, while I was looking at it, he was like, hey, there's tracks over there if you want to go look at them. So I was like, all right, you know what? That's fine. So I take about 30 seconds. I look down at this track. I'm like, all right, stood back in my footprint, picked the binoculars back up, and I go right back to that spot because I memorized like where a tree was and where this stump was and where there was this big cut up log, where the hill, like I memorized the surrounding area. So I go back right to that area, and there's nothing there. So I'm looking around. I'm trying to see if something's moving. Completely gone. Whatever was there was not there. There was some sort of bush, and it looked completely different. And I know that's where it was. So I start freaking out. I was like, did I really just see that? And but I didn't say anything. And that's what kind of what I should have done, and what I've realized when I do expeditions now is like, listen, if you think you see something, just ask, because having another set of eyes could make that determination.
Yeah.
Because if I was looking at a Sasquatch through binoculars and somebody else goes, oh, let me look, and they see it too, well, sweet, there we go. But in my opinion, I was looking at one. That's the only explanation I have for it. But I didn't get a secondhand opinion on it, and that's kind of what bothers me still to this day. But I don't really need that validation.
What happened with you and your dad in the Adirondacks?
That was back in 2015 or 2016. So my dad grew up in the Adirondacks, and he knew this spot to go hunting. So we made a plan to go up in there and just spend a couple days, like a long weekend up there hunting for early deer season, because the Adirondack deer season is sooner in the season than it is for like down in the Catskills where I'm from.
Mm-hmm.
So we figure, we got a couple doe tags for that area, so we could like early hunt up there and get something, and then come back down home, and then come back into rifle season and still have our doe tags there. So, and plus we needed, I just got out of high school, so I was planning on moving out and stuff. So it was kind of just like a little like last weekend kind of him and I thing. So we go up there, and we had a spot all planned out and everything. My dad showed me around the area and stuff, because he went to school there. So it was cool to see that. And, we just had a good time. So it was like one of the last nights we were there, and we were out pretty much all day up and down the trail. It's a very popular hiking trail. But we went off trail just to not be near hikers or anything like that in case. So we went in that morning, didn't see anything. We came back out, went to lunch, whatever, hung around town, came back to the camping spot. And then around, like, I think 3 or 4 o'clock, we decided to go back out for like last light. So we bushwhacked in, not very far, a little ways in. And I found a spot. It was fresh snow on the ground. There's deer tracks running through. I was kind of like in this circle of like hemlock trees all the way around me. So I just kind of like knelt down in like kind of underneath a branch, but I could see this big circle, so I could see out a little ways just in case something popped through, like whatever. And it's starting to get dusk and dark. My dad was like, I'm going to go somewhere else and try a different spot, like it increases our odds. It's like, okay, cool. So he walks away. Don't hear him anymore. I think he's about 200 yards away. So all of a sudden, like it gets really quiet and the sun's going down, like it's starting to get dark. And I don't know if you've ever been to New York, but in the winter, like I think the season was like late September, it doesn't take long to get dark, so by the minute it's dropping in light. And all of a sudden, I just, on the other side of the trees in the circle that I'm in, I just start hearing branches being broke. And like, not just like little like twigs and stuff, like branches. I'm like, okay, that's a little bit scary. Something's running towards me. So, I took the safety off because I'm expecting like a bear or a moose to come like running through the trees at any second because it's loud. Like, what is that? And it's not like coming around me. It's not getting quieter. Like it's staying just on the other side of the tree line that I can see. So like I'm expecting something to pop through at any second, and it's not. Also, I just keep hearing bang, crash, smash, and it's like, when you hear a tree fall in the woods, like that's the sound I'm talking about. So like I grew up logging. My family owned a logging company. And, like I've been in the woods, I've heard 1,000 trees fall, like I've heard branches, I've heard trees break. That's what it sounded like. It sounded like 8 inches plus just getting snapped and smashed and ripped apart. But the weird thing for me was I didn't hear any breathing. I didn't hear any grunting. I didn't hear any footsteps or thuds or anything like that. It was strictly just branches and logs just being tore apart. So I'm trying to like run through all these scenarios in my head, like what's going on over there. And I know that, if it was like two moose fighting or something, you'd hear like the antlers and you'd hear them grunting and same with bears. The white-tailed deer aren't going to make that much noise.
Right.
Even if it was one rubbing, like you would just hear the scrapes and that'd be about it. So I'm running through all these scenarios, like what could it be? What's making these noises? What's strong enough to make these noises? And then I hear like whoosh, smash, whoosh, crash. And I was like, wait a minute. So that means that something has these branches with leaves and stuff on them or maybe pine needles and is whipping them through the air and hitting other things. That's not a moose. That's not a bear. That's not a whitetail. That's not a bobcat. Something's grabbing these branches and like whipping them around, and it can't be human, and it's not a machine over there because there's no way to get a machine in there. There's no way it's a human. Like absolutely, these branches are entirely too big. Like thundering booms and cracks and stuff like that. It's not a person, and it's not multiple people. So about that time, I'm turning white. And I still got my gun up, and my dad comes running from wherever he was and runs over, and he's white because he doesn't know. He just hears these crashes from 100, 200 yards away. So he comes running up to me. He's like, "What the fuck is that?" And I was like, "Dad, I don't know." And he's like, "I thought like you were getting hurt or something was like mauling you." Like he's like, "I just started running." So about the time he got there, it went for another like 30, 45 seconds, I think. And then it just stopped and all went quiet. And we're looking at each other like, what the fuck is making those noises? I think we both knew, but we didn't want to say it. And like, understand, my dad and I are like super, super close. And we talk about everything, especially at that time, and we just never talked about it. We literally just got up and walked back to the camper and we left. The whole ride home, we didn't talk about it. We didn't talk about it for probably a couple years until I saw Todd's documentary. And that's what was like, okay, like I think this is what it was. And he was he didn't miss a heartbeat when he said, "Yep, I agree with you." And my dad grew up in those woods.
I think sometimes like saying it kind of makes it real.
Yeah, no, 100%. So like just to have my dad be like, "Yeah, yep, I agree with you. I think that's what it was like like that paradox that box was opened up, It's like, oh man, okay, this isn't just a TV show anymore.
Now that you've gotten some miles underneath your feet in this, and you've had these experiences out in Radium, what do you think was going on in the Adirondacks? Do you think that was like it putting on a display to run you out of the area, or did it even know you were there?
No, I think it very much knew I was there. And I think it was so more so recently, it's come to my attention that, they're not just animals. I think they're very spiritual, and I think they can understand and see a lot of things that we don't really understand yet. And I know that, some people are put here for a reason. And I know that sometimes, like Todd, they're just meant to be that person to, call it fate, call it whatever. But I think they pick people, and they go, okay, all right, like we're gonna show this guy that we're real, and it's gonna change this guy's life, and he's gonna move down this path. Like I think they have that feel for people, that kind of, I guess you could say that ESP. So for me, it was definitely an intimidation display, because I know I've been around them enough to know that they're a very intimidating species, and they like to show that they're powerful. So I know that's what that was. And but I also think it was like a catalyst for me, and I think they knew that.
So sort of like a spiritual introduction.
Right. Yeah, kind of like a shamanistic like wake up call.
Okay.
And I know that sounds a little bit woo woo, but in all reality, once you start really getting involved with it, like it's hard to not be. And they use what's it called? Infrasound. I don't know if you know that gorillas use it too.
Right.
And Todd's been hit by it. I haven't personally been hit by it, but I know people who've been hit by it. Which means if they can use that, they got to be on a different level all the way around. They can't just be hitting rocks together, making whoops, and then all of a sudden be able to knock somebody out with infrasound. Like there's no line there.
Right. Regardless of if people sit on the flesh and blood side or the quote unquote woo side, there are certain things that have to be acknowledged. And having personally experienced the effects of infrasound myself.
Oh, have you?
Yeah. And it was
that's so cool.
It was a crazy situation, but that kind of sent me down the road of like, okay, well, now I'm going to focus on this and try to understand this aspect.
Right. It's funny you say that, because my dad had a very similar experience, but it was with an orb. And it was in the Adirondacks. We went back like, I don't know, 5 or 6 years. No, I think it was like 8 years later. And so we went back to a different spot, and he saw an orb that night. And I had never, like, that wasn't even in the question for me. Like, I had never seen one. I believe in ghosts and stuff like that. And I've seen them, but it's never been like the whole, the orbs and like the fairies and, like that kind of stuff was too far out of reach for me.
Yeah.
The way I look at it is you can't put a door on a car that you don't own.
Right.
Like it doesn't fit anywhere at the moment. Maybe in a little bit, in a couple years it'll fit and it'll make sense. But right now, like I don't focus on it. I focus on Bigfoot. So my dad, he saw that orb, and I was like, okay, well now it's graduated from totally out of my vision to now it's on the shelf. Like now I have to look at this. Maybe I won't get to it, but now it's like it's there.
Yeah, someone you trust has told you that, hey, this is there.
Yeah, and that was, so now I got to do that. That's going to be another project. But
do you think there's a connection between orbs and Bigfoot?
My opinion with So a lot of people have the understanding, and they think that Bigfoot and orbs and aliens and all that stuff has something in common. And I think that they're right. So hear me out. You know what ley lines are, right?
Sure.
So I think there's very particular vortices or areas of energy in certain areas on the earth that attract a lot of different entities. So if Bigfoot is on a spiritual wavelength where they're attracted to some sort of energy like that, whether it be just out of curiousness or because they feed off of it, or maybe they get some of their spiritual guidance or energy from that, I think that the other things gravitate towards the same thing. So let's say that I think personally orbs are basically balls of energy. And I think that they kind of gravitate toward these areas because I don't know if they're sentient or anything like that, but I just think that physically they're a big ball of energy, and they just do their own things. I haven't gotten that far into it yet, but if they're gravitated towards energy, I guess, in energetic places or vortices, I'm going to assume that aliens being real, they're going to do the same thing. And I assume that paranormal things like ghosts, obviously, I think it's scientifically known that they do feed off of energy, whether that be battery or whatever the case may be, electrical energy. I think they're gravitated toward the same thing. So when we get into these areas where maybe a ley line is, where there's high energy, you start to see lights in the sky, you start to see orbs, you start to see or hear disembodied voices, and you start, having the Bigfoot type stuff come around.
That's an interesting theory and thought process, because the time that I mentioned where I felt the effects of infrasound, which happened to be very similar to the symptoms felt in haunting cases whenever you have high levels of EMF being detected and such. I was actually experiencing paranormal things that night out in the woods. Whenever that happened. And I grew up in a house that had paranormal activity, and I had never felt that before. I had felt fear on an extreme level. I have had sleep paralysis before, but other than those type things, I had never felt the same way that I felt that night in the woods. And the only thing I have to compare it to is infrasound. So looking into infrasound, like you said, gorillas, tigers, elephants, there's all sorts of things that produce it. Lots of birds produce infrasound and use it. But none of those things have the ability to target it specifically at a single individual out of a group. It's sound, so it kind of radiates out. And there are certain things that should happen in a scenario if you're being hit with those levels of infrasound that seem to be missing in situations involving Bigfoot. So that kind of led me to believe that, yes, this could very much be infrasound, but they're using it in a way that's not normal for just like your typical wildlife.
Right. Yeah, it's not like scientifically understood yet. Yeah, because I've heard of that too, where, it'll be 2 or 3 people standing next to each other, and all of a sudden one of them just hits the ground.
Yeah. Yeah. It seems, and like, I understand that, some people are going to be more sensitive to it than others. But for instance, if infrasound is traveling through the woods towards you, all the leaves and, just anything it comes into contact with should be like rattling and vibrating as the sound travels through it. And that doesn't happen.
I have one theory to contradict that.
Okay.
And that's the Rocky Mountains have a lot of Rocky Mountain Douglas fir and pine needles and hemlock. What if it's because it's mostly hemlock forest and not so many like leaves?
Okay. I was in East Texas when this happened.
Okay.
And was surrounded by pine trees. That would track with what you're saying.
I mean, I'm sure it's happened, but I don't really know of any personal infrasound, I would say, targets or is anybody being targeted by infrasound somewhere not in a pine or hemlock forest?
I don't know. And I also don't think like it's necessarily something that someone would look for or pay attention to. You know what I mean?
Right. Yes. It's not like there's a Bigfoot over there. They have more things to worry about than
Right.
what's between them, you know?
I mean, I was experiencing all sorts of things. I was seeing all sorts of things. I was kind of freaked out because I had been to this spot several times before then and never experienced any of these things. It always had a really bad energy feel to it.
Right.
But that night, you know, I'm experiencing all these things, and then all of a sudden I feel extremely sick.
Yeah.
I was doing everything I could to pretty much stay conscious. I had to like lay down in the back seat, and just nothing was helping. And finally, I had to ask the entire group of people that I was with. There's probably like 8 individuals there. And I was like, everybody, I have to go. And this is in the middle of like a Bigfoot outing.
Right. Yeah.
Nobody wants to be the party pooper. And I'm just like, hey, I gotta go. Something's wrong with me. Like something is seriously wrong.
Right.
And we left and got about a half mile down the road, and I started feeling fine. Everything was good. Felt drained, very low energy for the next couple days, but then everything was good. So I don't know.
It's definitely something that we just don't understand yet. And I think really the only way we're going to be able to understand it is once we can like sit down with a Sasquatch and have a Rosetta Stone.
Yeah.
That's really going to be the only way we can understand it. I mean, us as like civilians, because I'm sure the government already knows about it. It's probably old news to them.
I like to talk about all the theory stuff, and I can tell that, you know, you're a very knowledgeable guy and have had lots of experiences and have put a lot of thought to this. But people like to hear the stories of the encounters and experiences. So let's talk about some of that stuff. You had that first, what you feel was a sighting. I agree, most likely was a Bigfoot. So then just kind of walk us down the timeline. What's happened after that?
So that year was a very active year. There was a lot of things that happened that year. And honestly, it's so crazy for me to try to sit and explain it to somebody, but I've forgotten about quite a bit of things because there's always quite a lot of activity going on, and there's so many things happening, and there's so many finds and discoveries that we make that it's almost overwhelming. So I'm probably missing some details, and I'm probably missing some stories and happenings and stuff like that. But that was an active year. The next year after that, that was again another pretty awesome year. We had heard some vocalizations for like 100 yards away from camp, which was incredible. We also had, tree breaks happening around us. We had trees pushed down that we heard. I'm pretty sure that year, we had a sighting. Of course that was about 3 seconds from seeing it, but that's what I get.
Sure.
So, Ashley, was out there with us. It was just her and I. Todd had to go back into town to do something, so it was just her and I out there, and I think Brian touched on it pretty well on just how far back in the woods we are.
Yeah.
Out there. So it's just her and I. There's nobody else out there, and it's getting dark. And I'm going to try to remember this correctly. So her and I were sitting by the campfire, and we were actually being assholes. We were joking about like, wow, I wish they'd come out and do something. Like it's been quiet the past couple of days. What are y'all doing? And then like 15 seconds later, we get a tree pushed over. So her and I look at each other, we're like, oh my God, that was so cool. But we got to be careful because it could have been a bear, So I get up and I'm kind of walking over there because I want to see what's going on. I want to make sure, see what it is. And just in case it's a threat, because we need to get, in the camper. So, and, or grab the bear spray or whatever. So we're kind of like walking up towards the area where we heard it. And Like nothing's moving. We don't hear anything. We don't see anything. It's in that dusk area where it's just getting dark and your eyes start messing with you.
Mm-hmm.
So we're walking up and we're being like, hey, like we heard you, just trying to talk to it. And I heard whoop, like right where it came from. So I looked over at Ashley and I was like, oh my God, did you hear that? And just as I looked at her face, I wish this was like a video podcast because like there's no way for me to really describe it. I'd have to just react like she did. But I looked at her and she didn't look at me. She looked straight ahead and her eyes grew about twice the size and her mouth opened. She just did that. Like she just saw a ghost. Like she turned almost white. And I look back over and I'm like, I don't see anything. What happened? I'm like, what just happened? She goes, it just walked across the trail. It's like, damn it. It was 2 seconds. If I just wouldn't have looked away, I would have seen it. But that was really cool. And we heard him walking away. But that was kind of like one of the other almost instances where I saw it. And you can't fake that look. Like when you see something like that, that's literally life-changing to people, and you see that reaction on their face, there's no way you're faking that. Like I know that her eyes weren't playing tricks on her. It was light enough to see, but it was just dark enough to like cover himself. Yeah, so that was really cool. And then what was it? This last year, Brian and me and my dad saw UFOs like crazy.
Yeah, that was an insane story, man.
Yeah, and we had rocks being thrown at us at the campsite, and Brian actually live interacted with a Sasquatch. That was really cool. We were headed down to one of our trails on the bikes, and we were just leaving the campsite, and we heard knock, knock, and we all stopped and looked at each other. And he was like, "Oh my God, did you hear that?" I'm like, "Yeah, do a whistle or do something back." So he like did a whistle, and we hear knock back, and like everybody's eyes got really big. I'm like, dude, one more whistle, and if we get a return, we're going over there. Like that's our new rule: is if you hear something and you get a response, you just go there. It doesn't matter. Doesn't matter if it's 1 a.m. or lunchtime. We're going over there. So he did a whistle and we didn't get a return. And I was like, oh man, that would have been so cool. Because it was perfect. It was the perfect timing. Like we really didn't have anything else to do. So we would have just marched over there. But come to find out, like later that week, it was one of the last days we were there. Todd came in and we went for a hike in that area, which that's over in that area is the boundary between Banff National Park and Kootenai. So we walked onto the cut line, and then we walked over the cut line and into Banff. And it's old growth forest, like you wouldn't believe, like massive trees in there. There's no logging access. There's no roads in there. There's nothing. It's straight old wilderness. So we're just kind of walking around in there, and then all of a sudden we come across this gigantic structure. And it's got to be one of the oldest trees I've ever seen in my life. And I've been in the woods a long time. And it's probably a 200 or 300 year old Douglas fir.
Wow.
Or I'm sorry, Rocky Mountain Douglas fir. And it's all of 100 feet tall, and it's probably 6 foot around the base. And there's 3 telephone pole like trees leaned in each corner. There's 3 of them. One, we took compasses and lined it perfectly due north.
Wow.
The other one on the other side is perfectly due south. And then the one on the other side is like eastern, kind of in an eastern way. It's not really like precise east or west. But if you look up at the top, like the tips of the trees that are leaned in are like weaved in and bent in around the tree, the branches on the tree, and they kind of like circle around each other. We dug out around the base of one of them, and there's no root ball. And on the tree itself, you can see where there's a water line where it was laying down on the ground, dead. So this tree is probably all of 1,000 pounds, and something had picked it up off the ground and shoved it into place 3 times.
The displays of strength are insane sometimes.
And there's tracks all over the place. There's a tree break right there. You know, like we heard sounds like last year, a lot of things came from that area. And of course, it was like one of the last expeditions we did is we found, I think, what they were trying to lead us to.
So what do you think this structure represents to them?
I think it's like, Ashley said it best because she was there. I think it's kind of like paying homage to the tree because it's one of the oldest trees I've ever seen in my life. I can't imagine there's a lot of them still standing because, you know, it's kind of a pretty wet area. So I feel like with some heavy winds or just whatever, you know, erosion happens, you know, they don't stand that long. And this thing was, you know, pretty much perfectly healthy. And I think it's just one of those rare, you know, those rarities that you don't really find. And I think it was just kind of like hey, you know, like we're gonna throw these trees as like a monument to it, you know.
It's really interesting that you say that because this is something that I don't really talk about.
Ooh, yeah, let's get into it.
Well, I mean, you know, the limb formations and tree structures is something that's interested me for a long time. I have found some that there's no explanation. Something had to have done it. It's not natural at all. And of course, you know, you have a lot of people speculating as to what these things are used for and what they represent and everything, which is something that I've argued back and forth over the years myself. But over time, as my beliefs evolve whenever it comes to these things, I've started to think, you know, maybe there's something more to these structures. Maybe these structures aren't something that necessarily has like a simple use like people think, like shelter, for instance. Perhaps they are symbolic in nature. Perhaps they are religious in nature. Perhaps they are made based on the spiritual beliefs of these things.
Right.
Which is also something that, you know, humans have done forever. But whenever it comes to them, we tend to overlook that aspect. Do you think these creatures, I mean, I know you do because you've mentioned it, but what about their spirituality and things like that?
Yeah, I think they're very spiritual. I think there's, you know, like look at the Native Americans just as a reference, you know, like their God was Earth. Mm-hmm. You know, they're the holy, maybe not the Holy Spirit. I'm saying it wrong. But like the Great Spirit was that's their, you know, that's their Odin, that's their Jesus, that's, you know, that's everything to them. And I think it's kind of the same thing. You know, honestly, I think the natives learned a lot of their stuff off the Sasquatch.
I do too.
I really think they do. A lot of their survival techniques and the things that they do and the way that they practice their beliefs, it looks a lot like Sasquatch to me. But that's a different story. Anyway, I think it's very spiritually based. You know, I know that, you know, they have their seasons of, just like berry, you know, they eat their berries, they go after their calories for the fish, you know, and the salmon runs, they have their elk herds, you know, and I think they're a lot like wolves where they kind of cull the elk out and the other animals out. Like they're not out there just trying to kill everything and anything. They go after the sick, or they go after the old, or they go after the bulls that have bred already, and they keep the cows safe, you know, because they need to keep the population up because they need to feed their kids, you know, and their kids need to feed their kids. So I think they have it figured out pretty well, but I think they also understand the very, very thin boundary that they rest on when it comes to the ecosystem. I think they know that, you know, if something major happens, what that affects entirely, you know. So I think logging is a very big thing that they very much don't like because it offsets so much of the ecosystem and the ecology. And it really does ruin the area for a while because, you know, you cut all the trees out, there's no root structure, and then you start having landslides. Landslides go into rivers, that changes the course of the river. Change the course of the river, the salmon don't run that way.
Right.
You know, like there's a lot of one thing changes a lot. So I think that a lot of the times they just, that's why we see a lot of problems with logging. That's why a lot of loggers have, run-ins with these guys because they don't want them to log. And it all stems back to, okay, well, if they have this immense knowledge and they have this understanding of how the ecosystem works and how fragile it is, they have to be sentient in some sort of way.
I mean, absolutely. They don't act like an animal. There are times whenever there's very animalistic behavior, especially whenever it comes into terms of displays to run people out of an area or whatever. But whenever you start paying attention to their actual behavior, or trying to at least, it goes out of the realm of seeming like you're dealing with any sort of animal or wildlife.
Right.
It definitely goes into the realm of a person. You're dealing with a person.
I agree with you.
Or at least the closest thing to it that we have an understanding of.
And I also know that they constantly triangulate. You think there's one, there's three.
Right.
There's been times where I have been distracted and I shouldn't have been worried about the one I'm looking at. I should be worried about the one that's behind me, or the one that's off to the side holding that rock, waiting for me to reach for the gun,
Do you take firearms with you out there?
Well, it's Canada, so.
Yeah, I'd advise to always carry a firearm in Canada for sure.
Yeah, we're just going to leave it at that. But.
Have you had any encounters with like bears and stuff while out there?
Okay, so this is going to be preposterous to you, but for me, so understand, how far out we are, right? We've talked about it a bunch. We're like 20 kilometers down a logging road. That's 20K down another logging road. That's like 2 hours from any town. We're out there, right? It's grizzly territory. We have this alley that's on one of the main roads to go in. It's called Bear Alley. There's bear. We have pictures of 1,000-pound grizzly bears. His name's Simba.
Jeez.
We know the bears around there. They're there. There's sign of them everywhere. Dude, there's trees that have been tore up by these grizzlies. They're there. I've been there for 6 weeks. All the same time, all just before hibernation season, when they're trying to get as many calories in, where you're going to find them, they're stripping the berries off the ground. I haven't seen a single bear.
Huh.
There's been expeditions before I get there and after I get there. And mind you, I spend 2 weeks out there every year I go there. Every day that I'm there, I'm pretty much in the woods. 2 weeks every year. Haven't seen a single bear. Haven't had one by me. Haven't had one near me. The expedition next, they see 5 of them. So I've done crazy things, and I've been out there by myself, nobody around. It's just me. And I've walked into Bear Alley with just a pair of binoculars, just because I needed to test the theory. I needed to do something crazy. The bears do not come around me. That's the only theory I have. That's the only way I can explain it. Whenever I'm there, the bears do not come around. I don't really know why. I almost feel protected in a way, but I don't want to have that egotistical mindset because that's how you die.
Yeah, Timothy Treadwell. Don't
exactly.
Don't ever think you can't be taken. But do you think the Bigfoot have something to do with it?
There's really no other explanation for me. There really isn't, because mountain lions don't come around, bears don't come around, wolves. You have nothing to worry about with wolves. I've seen plenty. I have pictures of wolf tracks there with my hand next to them. I'm not worried about wolves because wolves never attack humans. As long as you don't become a food source and you don't feed them, they won't kill you. That's a very easy line to not cross. So I have no concern with the wolves. I do have concern with the mountain lions and bear, but that's because they have a history. Not so much around there because they stay away from our camp areas. But even then, when I'm bushwhacking out in the wilderness off trail, I should run into something.
Yeah,
and I never have. So, I mean, either I just put off that kind of energy, which I don't think I do because I'm 5'8" and all of 140 pounds. I don't think I have that look to me, or that energy to me. So to me, it's almost like they are kind of in a way protecting me, or maybe their presence, maybe just being around me is what keeps the bears away. I don't know. I don't want to be that guy to be like, oh, yeah, Sasquatch protect me. I'd like to think that, and I'd like to think I have that reputation, or not the reputation, but that relationship with them. But I can't say for sure. So I don't know. It's something that I've noticed over the past 3 years going there. And I'm sure when I go there this year, I probably won't see any either.
Is it normally the same group of people that are coming into this area, or do you bring visitors to this area?
Yeah. So about, I don't know what the statistics are like this year, but it does fluctuate a lot. When COVID happened, it was mostly just Canadian citizens and people who've already been there. So it's most of the time it's return customers, which have turned into being very close friends and pretty much family at this point, because we've spent so much time together. And you understand too, you're in the backwoods of BC, you got to get close to the person you're walking behind.
Right.
It's not just, oh, here's a tree break, here's a footprint. It's a very personal thing. You're spending every waking second with these people. You're sitting around a campfire with them, talking about life and this and that, and you're going on hikes, and you're sharing life experiences, and and let's say you do have an encounter with a Sasquatch that brings you guys closer. So a lot of the times it's return people who really love the area and love the Sasquatch and have habituated themselves with the Sasquatch in that area and in that tribe. We do, however, bring new people in. And they go through a vetting process. So like, if you reach out to Todd, he's going to call you. If he has an opening, he'll talk to you and just kind of just feel you out, basically, just like meeting somebody on the street. You're just going to feel them out before you invite them into their house, right?
Sure.
Because we don't want people that are going to go in there and destroy it, or let it be known where it is to everybody in the world. So we have, 1,000 people show up and the news and this and that. It's the last thing we want. We want people who are responsible. We want people who have a good background. We want people who are, open-minded and willing to learn, and, that aren't really going to be freaked out at every little sound they hear. Like they need to be, in some aspect, they need to be rugged, because, we're going on 10-mile hikes. You're going to scratch your knee. You might sprain your ankle. Like there's things that happen out in the woods, and we need to know that you're going to be okay. So there's a vetting process that you have to go through in order to really even be considered to come out.
Has anybody had a negative experience whenever they were out there?
There's been a few stories that I've heard where, like it just wasn't what they expected. And I get that. I mean, you can't expect the Sasquatch to come out and ride a unicycle for everybody, so there's those kind of people. But there's also the ones who, they take it very, very seriously. And there's one story of, I think a native tracker went out with Todd, and they're way back out in the back country out there, like off trail. And they come across a Sasquatch impression, like a footprint. And the guy's a tracker, like from, like a native community. And he's looking at it, and he's studying it, and he's looking around, and he goes, okay, home, please. And Todd's like, what? It's like, yeah, they're real. I want to go home. He goes, well, you're like 2 days in. We have another 3 days. He goes, no, take me home. Like, it's fine. I don't want to be out here. This thing is like 1,000 pounds. We don't know anything about it. You don't know where it eats, where it sleeps, what it does. We're out in the middle of nowhere, literally. We don't know where these things are. We don't know where this one is. I want to go home. So there's been some times,
Yeah, I mean, I get it, though. I get it. If you're going out there to find out, definitively if they're real or not, and if you really know your stuff and you're convinced, that's not for everyone. Not everybody wants to stay out there and play with them.
Yeah. Yeah, and I'm crazy enough to sleep outside.
Yeah. No thanks. No thanks. Has there been any what you would consider aggressive encounters?
Yeah, I mean they've bluff charged Todd a couple times, you know, and that's mainly just because he gets a little bit too close to their domicile, and they don't really like that. So, you know, that's kind of expected. A lot of the times, if there's any negative encounters, it's because they don't come around. That's pretty much the extent of it. So, like, let's say you go out there with kind of any sort of ill intent, or maybe not, you're not open minded, or you're just very doubtful and you're untrusting, or you're just untrustworthy, and they can tell or see that, they're just not going to come around. You know, so about the worst that could happen is nothing.
How much are people paying to come out there?
So there's a lot to it. It's not just, you know, like, oh, come out on a camping trip. So understand that it takes a very big toll on vehicles just to get out there. It's a 3.5 hour drive. Fuel's expensive in Canada. We got to go basically 40 kilometers down a dirt road with potholes and logging trucks and rocks and boulders and hills and everything like that. Cars get beat up very quick. We go through about an entire suspension a season.
Jeez.
Because we're out there every other week, you know. So you're talking about a lot of miles. You're talking about a lot of wear. You got tires, you got brakes, you got suspension parts, you got gas, you got, you know, to and from the airport, picking people up. There's a lot of things just involved in picking somebody up from the airport and driving them out there.
Yeah, yeah.
So, you know, now you have, okay, we're out there. There was a lot of time and energy put into finding the research area and developing it. Now we have campers put out there. So we had to tow them out there and buy them to put them out there so people were comfortable.
Yeah.
We have Starlink out there. We have generators. We have $5,000 a piece. I think we have 5 of them, electric bikes to get people around. Firewood to bring out there. Chairs. We provide all the meals. We provide all the food. We provide all the drinks. We do a shopping trip before we go out. Every trip, you know, and we don't get fucking, you know, we don't get yodels. We don't get cosmic brownies. You know, we get good food. We get stuff that's healthy. We get stuff that's going to make you feel better. We get granola bars and Cliff bars and, you know, fresh fruit, all that stuff. So, you know, that's kind of an expensive thing right there. Just prepping for a week for food, especially in Canada where the prices are much higher than you'd think. And then you got propane and all the other things that involve just being there, you know, and then, okay, now you need all your hiking shoes and your clothes, and you need your backpack, and you need your binoculars, and you need your camping gear, and you need your first aid kits and all of that. GPS units are like $300-400 a piece. You have to pay $100 or $200 a month for some of the subscriptions just so you can hit the red button and an SOS. So they send a helicopter to you, you know. There's a lot of things to it. And then just our time, you know. Like if I do an expedition, I have to leave Florida, fly to Canada, and take a week off of work to do this expedition, you know. So and there's a lot of things that I've learned, and there's a lot of things that I know that somebody else may not, you know, and that's kind of my job, being somebody who does the expeditions now and somebody who guides people. I need to know these things. I need to know what to do in these scenarios and how to react and how to, you know, basically if somebody gets hurt, how to help them, you know. So it's not just, oh, let's go for, you know, a weekend in the woods. There's a lot to it, and there's a lot of overhead because of it, and that's why we charge as much as we do, because understand that, you know, just because you're spending, you know, $2,500, $3,000 for a week doesn't mean you're not getting anything out of it, you know. And that's just our overhead. That's really just covering our overhead.
So the person just has to pay for their travel expenses to and from the airport or wherever.
Yep.
And then cover, you know, they bring their own clothes and everything, but everything else is essentially provided.
Pretty much. Yep. Yeah. My expeditions are a little bit cheaper because, you know, I'm not Todd Standing. So I gave Brian a deal that I don't think I'll ever be able to match unless it's like, you know, Jeff Meldrum. You know, like it's the only time I'd ever charge that little. And that was literally just so that, like, I didn't, you know, lose out on a week's worth of pay, at home. I literally just charge them what I make at work.
To put this in perspective for someone that's listening and falling out of their chair. In Africa, you can go on a gorilla sightseeing trip. What this gets you is you provide your own travel to basically a base camp where there are rangers there. So you have to get to Africa to begin with, however much that costs. You go to the base camp, you have a little group of people that get together. The rangers go over the safety precautions with them. You divide into groups. You are then transported, basically on a bus or taxi to a remote area. You get out, you hike out into the forest. You have essentially one or two guides with you that have like machetes and everything, and they take you into the forest and basically bushwhack you back there and find the gorillas, and you get to hang out with the gorillas for a while. And then hike back home, back to the buses, back to base camp, and then you're done. It's around a 2 to 3 hour process, I believe, the whole thing. And that costs on average $3,000 per person. And there's no guarantee that you'll see the gorillas, but gorillas are something that's completely documented and they essentially know right where they're going to be and walk you straight there. So 3 hours for $3,000 to see some gorillas, or a week-long experience where everything is covered and you have the chance to encounter something that will change your life forever.
Yeah. So I agree with you, and obviously I'm right there with you, but I want to take the Sasquatch out of the equation just for a second, because I want people to understand that it's not just about the Bigfoot. Okay. So you're coming out to British Columbia, Canada, in the Rocky Mountains, right? I love nature. I love the woods. I love the mountains. I love the views. So let's just take a vacation. Let's just say we're taking a vacation to Canada, to the Rocky Mountains, into Banff National Park. The water is blue from the glaciers. It is the best water you could ever drink in your life. It's the most beautiful scenery you'll ever see in your life. It's stocked full of animals and habitats for the animals. You can see anything from ground squirrels and birds to grizzly bears and everything in between. Just going there for the week is a spiritual reset for you, because you literally you go out there and you drink the water, you get in the water, you breathe in the air. It's all pine forest, amazing smells. You get the dirt in your hands, you get the dirt on your feet, you go barefoot. It's just, you forget about paying your credit card bill. It's not about that anymore. It's reconnecting with nature. And once you reconnect with nature, and once you get to that, you fall back in love with nature, that's when the Sasquatch come around, because that's what they want. They want us to be in love with the earth, because that's what they are. They want us to get on that mindset where this is absolutely gorgeous. I don't want to hurt a fly. I love everything about this. And you're just super at peace. That's when they come around. So you're not just paying to see a Bigfoot. You're paying for a vacation that ultimately resets you and makes you become a healthier person, and you see things a little bit differently. It's not just getting up, making coffee, driving to work, flipping people off, hating your job, coming home, getting yelled at by the wife, anything
Right.
like that. It's not that anymore. You wake up and it's just nature. You hear the birds singing, we use the bathroom outside. Everything is, it's all just outdoors. You go for bike rides and beautiful scenery, the mountains, the snow caps, like the wildlife. I can't really describe it. You just have to, and I have 1,000 pictures of places that I've been to 10 times. It's just you just can't get over that beauty, you know. So if you remove Sasquatch from from the mixture entirely, you're paying $3,000 for a week in Banff National Park, you know, and I think that's a very reasonable price regardless, and that's being chauffeured around and not having to worry about anything. That's everything taken care of for you, you know. That's why we don't have a problem saying that's what the cost is, you know. And it also weeds out the people that we don't really want to be there either, you know, because you don't want somebody who can just not appreciate it,
right,
and not care and throw beer cans around and you know, like, destroy our stuff. You know, that's not the kind of people we want. So it kind of works hand in hand that way.
and the price helps do that as well. I mean, that's also something that I'm sure Todd has factored in to set the price at a level where it will weed out some of the people that are just wanting to go and troll, you know, or find where the area is or whatever.
Exactly. And the people who are going to spend that money are going to be serious about it, and they're going to be open-minded enough about it to be like, okay, you know, if I'm going to spend this money, it's going to be for something.
Are you aware of any scenarios where somebody, you know, paid the money, they've never been there before, they go on the trip, and they have a sighting?
Yeah, that's happened. Yeah, no, that's happened. Probably, I don't know how many, but I know that there's a lot. It's happened quite a bit.
Wow.
There's one guy, Darren. He had that happen. Actually, my dad. Yeah, my dad's a perfect example. Never seen a Sasquatch his whole life. He's 55. I took him out third day there. He went out at night to go to the bathroom, and he was about 30 feet away from one standing there looking at him.
Wow.
Yeah, it's happened.
How did your father react to that?
He didn't know what to do. He actually started getting closer. Then he's like, well, maybe if this is mad at me or if this is a bear for some reason, I probably shouldn't be getting closer to it.
Yeah, talking about getting caught with your pants down.
Yeah, pretty much. So Brian actually did a video in the spot the next morning with my dad. So if you go on his channel, you can see it.
You talked about the campers that you guys have set up there. Do they ever come up and like bang on the campers or rock them or anything?
Yeah. We actually have Todd has a picture of a handprint on the window. It's got dermal ridges and everything. It's like fingerprints.
I wanted to ask you, since you were there, if I could hear your perspective of the UFO event that you guys witnessed.
Oh yeah, so that was wild. So I grew up in the Catskills. There's not a lot of light filtration out there, especially, you know, in the town I'm from. I spent a lot of time looking up. I know what planes look like. I know what satellites look like. I know what weird things look like because I've seen UFOs out there. And so we're all out there, and there's just these they're glowing like light blue orbs. And I never forget it because I had binoculars and I was looking at them through my like very expensive set of binoculars because I wasn't doing that whole thing on the first expedition again. I have a set of Vortex binoculars, not messing around. So I'm zoomed in on these things streaking across the sky, and they're just glowing. They're not blinking. They're not flashing like satellites or like Starlink or like a plane would. They're just blue orbs just streaking across the sky. And one was moving like a certain speed, and another one would kind of like intercept it from a different angle, from a different part of the horizon, going faster, which means that they're probably not in the same, you know, like I would assume that they're either just not in the same height range. They're not like in the stratosphere or whatever. Maybe you can travel faster. I know you can travel faster outside of our what's it called?
Atmosphere.
Our atmosphere. Thank you. And so like I understand that, but also if they were both satellites, you'd think they'd be going the same speed. They weren't. And they also don't make 90-degree corrections.
Not satellites.
No. So I watched one. And it was moving straight, and then it made like a 45-degree correction in a straight, like just not without slowing down, without stopping and turning, just 45. And then it went for another probably couple thousand miles, and then turned again kind of in like a 20, 25-degree angle. Like, it didn't turn much. Brian watched one go straight and without missing a beat or slowing down, do a 45-degree angle. And just boop. We saw like 15 or 16 different balls that were all moving in different directions at different speeds and changing their course multiple times during our view of them.
You mentioned having seen UFOs out there before. Do you think that's just due to, the lack of ambient light, or do you think there's something drawing them to the area?
I think it's both, but I think there's also another factor we're not considering, and that's the amount of people out there. I think that I think it's the energy source there. I think it's the lack of the light that enables us to see them, but I also think that because there's so little people out there that they kind of get away with it, and they don't have to, get tracked by the U.S. government every time they fly over. I think they are, regardless, but still, I think there's just less of a risk.
Have you guys experienced anything that you would consider, Bigfoot woo or paranormal, like Mindspeak or cloaking or anything?
No cloaking for me, but Mindspeak definitely. There was so I didn't tell Todd about this because I didn't want it to be, I didn't want it to be planned or anything like that. So I've had pretty much virtually everything except what's it called? We were just talking about it. Infrasound happened to me. I've had whoops. I've had trees pushed down. I've seen them. I've had everything. I've heard everything. Right. The one thing that hasn't happened to me was a rock being thrown at me. Right. It's never happened, and that was kind of like a subconscious, like, I want that to happen. That's like one of the only things that hasn't happened to me. So one morning, it was just Todd and I out there. We woke up and we heard a couple wood knocks, and it was like 9 o'clock in the morning and 8 o'clock in the morning. So we're like, let's go over there. So like, I'm still in pajamas. It's like, whatever. So we walk over into the tree line. And one thing that if you've gone out there with me and you know about me is I love bunch berries. They're my favorite berry. And I always look for them. I'll stop people on an expedition just to kneel down and eat bunch berries. I love them. Don't care. So we're just walking through and he goes, oh, right here. And I'm like, what do you mean? Oh, there's a forest floor full of bunch berries. Like, I'm good. I'll be right here. So he's like 15, 20 feet away from me. And we're just kneeling down. I'm loading up on bunch berries. I'm having a great time. Not a care in the world. And he's like kneeling down. I look over to him. I'm like, do you want some? Like, what are you doing? And he just didn't look okay. I was like, dude, are you good? And he looks up at me and goes, watch this. And I'm like, what? And all of a sudden you just hear like a rock come flying through the tree line and land about 15 feet behind him. I was like, what just happened? What was that? Like, when you throw a rock through a tree, like it hits the branches and you hear it bounce off some stuff. Like, it didn't fall out of the sky, but it had an arc pattern where like it came from a ways away and just like went through a couple of treetops and landed right behind him. And I found that rock, and it's in the camper right now. I found that rock. That was really, and it was like the perfect size. Like, it wasn't like a baseball size. It was probably it was like a quarter the size of a baseball, but it had that like kind of oblong length where like it was chunky enough you could toss it away as if you wanted to, And so that was, and I didn't tell him that I wanted a rock to be thrown at me. So I told him, I was like, oh my God, that's I've never had a rock thrown at me. Like, I wanted that to happen. He goes, yeah, dude, I was literally like, I felt weird, and I just like somebody spoke through me, like something was like, watch this. And just all of a sudden that happened. He's like, I didn't think it. I didn't want to say it. I didn't try. Like, I didn't know you wanted a rock thrown at me. Like, whatever. No idea. And I didn't tell him. So there's no way he would have known. And it was like, there's nobody over there. It was just him and I, So that was the defining moment of definite, like, telepathy, that happened there.
Early in the show, I asked you about the videos and you being all in on them, and you said, they are.
Yeah.
How did you reach that conclusion?
Well, nobody's proven him wrong. And, understand that he's never changed his story. He's never swayed his opinion. He's, to this day, 20 years later, he's still out there actively trying to get footage and actively putting the message out there that they're real, and he stands by it. And he'll never sit there and say, or he's never, like, I've done interviews with his sister, who was supposedly in quote unquote a makeup design artist, which is complete and total bullshit, because you can go on YouTube and watch the interview I did with her. Like, she just knew how to sew, if anything. I've been to his house. I've been in his campers. I've been in his cars. I know him. He's never come out and go, here's a mask. Here's fucking Jake. He doesn't have any. He like, the best makeup artists in the world can't make that. And if they could, they'd have made it already. Nobody's made a mask as good as Jake, as realistic and as animatronic as Jake. I don't understand, too, the spot that he would have had to hike a 300-pound animatronic head into to set this up to make it look realistic is unfathomable. He doesn't have he can't do it. There's no way. The makeup artists from Hollywood or whatever production company you could think of, they don't have the funding to make a mask like that. And it's not even a mask. Like, it blinks, it moves. You see it, like, nose flares. Like, it's not just a Walmart mask that he put on. Like, it's a real being. There's no way around it. There's no way it could be fake. Absolutely no way. And I think the problem that people have, too, with it is it looks so realistic and it looks so human-like that we don't have anything to compare it to. Like a gorilla, it looks different from us. All right. Okay. That makes sense. And we still gave people shit about it until we actually made the discovery scientifically and habituated with them. It's the same thing with Sasquatch. They share DNA with us. They're actually more hominid than us. The DNA shows that they're more hominid than us. And you can ask Jeff Meldrum about that. I don't know enough about DNA, but I know that's the case. If they're more hominid than us, of course they're going to look like us. So another thing too is they look similar to us, but they look different from each other. Just like I look different from you. You look different from a guy down the street. We have our characteristics and we have, our bloodline and stuff. That's why they look different, but they look so similar to us. And you can't fake that. You can't turn that into a mask. You can't show those, those facial structures, especially if you don't know what you're doing. I can't draw anything. Like, I don't have the artistic ability to make anything like that, and AI wasn't even out then, so you can't say it was AI. And Todd also brought all his footage, all the raw footage off the SD card that he recorded it onto, to what's it called? The videographers who, like, they can break down the video and look at the different layers of it and everything and see if something's been, like, dubbed in or filled over top of or added on top of or any effect, like, computer wise. And there's no altercation to the footage,
right?
Which means it wasn't CGI either. So if it was a real footage, out in the woods with no computer analog or anything that has to do with it, and it moves, and he doesn't have the makeup artist or whatever you want to call it, if he doesn't have the skills to do that, and it's also been 20 years since he's took that video, and nobody's come out and said, oh yeah, I made the mask, or oh yeah, this or that. Nobody said anything. Everybody just tries to debunk it because they only have footage. They don't have any physical proof of it. There's no way it can be fake, right? Because let's say that Todd hired somebody, right? Let's say he hired some special effects makeup artist to make that mask. Would have been like friggin' 400, probably $500,000 to make something maybe close to that. He doesn't have the money for that. There's no way he's going to pay somebody to do that. And if he didn't pay somebody to do it, they wouldn't have made it. And if he did pay somebody to do it, and even if they signed an NDA, right? That they're only good for 5 or 10 years. So why not come out and say, yeah, I made it. Here's the receipt.
Like I said, you're not here to defend Todd. I feel it my obligation to say that there was a film project that Todd was working on that's known. He was putting together a Bigfoot film that was not a documentary, but sort of a reenactment type film based on true events, we'll say. And that there was a makeup effects guy that was hired to work on that project. They had a falling out. It was never said what the falling out was over, to my knowledge. I just know that they parted ways and that the mask maker guy was not happy with Todd for whatever reason. Not even going to speculate that. That person, that individual, did pass away. So if he was responsible, he wouldn't be able to clear the air about it or come forward about it because he is deceased.
Fair enough.
And I know that 2 professional makeup people involved in the effects industry, one who works for Weta Workshops and has done films like Kong and Lord of the Rings, believes the faces are not real, that they are manufactured.
Okay.
As well as a Bigfoot costume maker has also put his credentials on the line saying that he thinks they are fake.
Okay.
Now, those are just opinions. I've heard the same thing about the Patterson film 1,000 times. Yeah. There's all kinds of rumors about that. But in my opinion, you're absolutely correct. They have never been proven or debunked or anything else.
And I think it's, the way I look at it now too is Todd had to be a certain person in order to go get that footage, right? Like, understand what that man had to go through to acquire that footage. So now look at all the backlash and all the hatred he's got just from that, right? I feel like that's a huge discouragement to anybody in the field who wants to get footage, because you're just going to be looked at as a hoaxer and a fraud and a liar.
Oh, 100%.
Regardless if your footage is real or not, there's no way to prove that it's real. So how am I supposed to go? Like, me personally, how am I supposed to go under Todd's wing and get footage and not be looked at as a hoaxer?
Right.
How is anybody going to go get footage and it not be analyzed down to the freaking leaf on the ground? Like, everybody's so toxic about the footage. And granted, there's a lot of AI coming out now that some people, who I will not mention, have been helping with the development of the graphics and how, the Bigfoot look. And I think that's going to do very bad things for the Bigfoot community, especially when it comes to trying to validate real Sasquatch footage from AI or fake. But that's another thing we got to worry about too. At what point is it going to be enough? At what point is there going to be a piece of footage where you can look at it and go, yep, there's no faking that. That's 100% real. Sasquatch is real. What's it going to take?
I don't think it's possible. Not in today's times. You would have to bring in a body.
Yeah, and I'm very anti-kill too. But
yeah, I think the people that are best suited to do that, that would actually have the capabilities of doing that, are knowledgeable enough about these things that they don't want to do it. They will not do it.
Yeah. Too, like, understand, if they're, they're not just dumb apes. We know that they're sentient. We know that they have feelings. We know that they have, traits like humans. I don't want to see somebody killed just to prove a point.
No.
I think that's fucking ridiculous.
Yeah.
So why should we kill a species that we don't even know how many of a population there is just to prove that it's real? Did we have to kill a gorilla to prove that it was real? Let's look at the Tasmanian devil or the Tasmanian tiger, whatever it was called. I know the name for
thylacine.
it. Yeah, the thylacine. Okay. Let's say that there was 2 left on the earth. Are you going to shoot the one just to show that they're real? I think that's pretty irresponsible.
Absolutely.
You know, especially if they're not, if you know, like if they had their own religion and they were sentient, they have rights. You know, and at what point too? Think about it. If there's a tribe of them, right? You can't go into the Amazon and kill a tribe member and walk out. That's not how that works. You're gonna die. It's the same thing with the Sasquatch. And it wasn't an argument on Facebook. I was talking to this guy who commented on, I think it was one of like Brian's pages or something like that. And he said, you know, we're going to have to get a body in order to prove it. And I disagree with that. So I stated my opinions on it. And, you know, it was a very cordial, you know, conversation. And I appreciate people who can be cordial on Facebook. You know, and I wasn't trying to be smart or anything like that. But the reality situation is, I know they're always triangulating. Even if you have 6 guys going there armed to the teeth and you do manage to shoot one, is it worth the life of any one of those men who have a family, who have parents, who has, you know, kids? Is it worth their life just to prove it? What about the other 2 guys who probably got seriously hurt? Okay, now let's say that all is well, you shot one, you maybe lost a couple of guys, you got the body out somehow. Now you make a phone call and go, I got a Bigfoot body. Who do you think's going to show up? The fucking government. They're going to take that, they're going to silence you, and it's going to be washed under the table. So now these men died and got seriously wounded for nothing.
I will agree to the fact that it would take a body to prove it. But I'm okay with it not being proven.
In a perfect world, I want one to just walk out of the woods with somebody, with or without, whatever. Walk out of town or walk out of the woods, walk into town, and just sit down. Let people walk up and touch them and whatever, and get pictures and let the news show up, and then let them just walk back into the woods and never be seen again. I think that might be all that we would need in all reality.
Yeah, but that would be unfortunately disastrous for them, I think, as a species.
Yeah. But understand too that we're destroying so much of their habitat with the logging that something needs to be done. Otherwise they're going to lose their habitat.
And I believe Todd has worked on that in the past. Another point for Todd. I don't know too many hoaxers that try to get them legally proven to exist and protected, and he has done that.
Yeah.
Well, Kyle, I appreciate you joining me and sharing some of your insight. I'd like to have you back sometime, man. I think you got a whole lot more to offer.
Oh my God, I could talk for hours about this. Thank you for taking the time to have me on, and I appreciate you listening and just kind of let me ramble.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Have you had an encounter with something you can't explain? Bigfoot, ghosts, UFOs, anything at all? Send me an email at bigfootcrossroads@gmail.com. If you get a chance, check out the website, bigfootcrossroads.com. You can find links to my social media, past episodes, links to the merchandise, everything you need all in one place. And until next time, remember, there's something in the woods.